few months ago, we met in the summer for Aqua rate negotiations. And so I brought Jennifer Johnson today from Aqua, so she can kind of go over it with you guys, what we discussed.
Sure.
Thank you, Jen.
I have a summary of the, I'm going to take one and pass one around. I need that.
You need that.
I need that, okay. And actually one of those too.
You need one of these
Yeah.
as well?
Here we go. Thank you. So just as a quick recap while that's going around, rate negotiations were this year because the current rate plan, that was a 5-year plan that we negotiated back in 2015, which is hard to believe it's that long ago, expires at the end of 2021. So the way the process works, which I explained this process at your council meeting, I think at the beginning of the summertime.
Yep.
So that meeting took place on July, I believe it was July the 22nd, I forget what the date, yeah, July 22nd. Yeah, and Lori and the mayor, and someone else was, oh yeah, Tim was there too, yeah, represented the city. We had representatives from almost all of the areas, a couple people didn't send anybody. And afterwards, we came to a rate agreement that night, and I passed out this rate negotiations recap to all the people that were at the meetings, and wrote up ordinances or resolutions that reflected what we agreed to at the rate negotiations and distributed them to all the communities. So they're in various stages of approval right now. I got back, I think maybe 4 of them, like Village of Lowellville, I think Coatesville, Springfield, but there's still some more outstanding. And so that's why the ordinance is presented for your consideration and approval tonight. So a little bit of the quick background is, and I covered some of this at that meeting a few months ago, but down under the planned agreement details, those are the rates that we agreed to. So it's a 4.25% increase for the first 2 years and 4.5% increase for the final 2 years. I show in that top left corner of the table what the current average monthly bill is right now for 3,900 gallons a month. It's $50.11. So you'll see in the kind of the turquoise blue the impact to the average residential customer each year or each month of the rate plan. So for the first year, the average monthly bill will go up $2.13. And then, and so forth, $2.17 the following year, $2.45 the following year, and then $2.56 the following year. And during that 4-year period, we presented a capital improvement plan totaling $27 million for our whole system in this area over the 4-year plan. And the details, we present a little bit more detail to the negotiating team as far as how that money gets distributed. The focus on the next 4 years is going to be on main replacement. Our main replacement rate needs to be a little higher considering the number of breaks we have per mile of main. And it's mostly because the system's old, as is all water systems. So we focused on the improvements to our treatment plant the last 5 years. So we're shifting the bulk of our capital investment to main replacement these next 4 years. One of the questions that came up from your group last time I met with council was how Campbell plays into this. So I just want to reiterate that Campbell was not part of this rate negotiation, and the capital improvements, this is for outside, I mean, it's all one big capital plan, but we have a budget set aside for the work we think needs done in Campbell. And that is why their rates were established when we purchased that system last year. And their rates are locked in through 2024. So there is a 1-year difference there, so I'll have to get with Campbell and see how we address that final year. But the good news is, and it was kind of planned this way when we established their rates, at the end of 24, the rates will be almost identical. So the idea is when we negotiate next time, they'll be part of the process and everybody will be on a uniform rate starting in 2026. So that's the way we handled Camel, and that was understood when we purchased Camel, that they would come into the negotiations, not this time, but the next time. And their rates right now are higher, and the plan was that the rest of Struthers would be catching up, by the time we got to 2025, 2026. This little summary sheet was just, it doesn't seem like, the news hasn't been covering many of the municipal meetings lately. I remember last time we negotiated, sometimes they come and if they see that you passed some kind of legislation regarding water rates, this is a nice fact sheet, to kind of talk from if you're questioned on it. A little bit of background about how we do rates and what the rate details are. And at the bottom there, those are the communities that are involved in the rate negotiations. Any questions?
Now, if we didn't negotiate this in our meeting that we have, we'd go to the Ohio.
Public Utility Commission. We would have to file a rate case with the Public Utility
And
Commission.
it would probably be a lot more.
I wouldn't say a lot more so much, but it's a different process. And yes, they can we would go in. There's a case right now before the commission for the rest of the states, and I think they went in for like a 10-11% increase. It's just a different process. What they do is in the other areas they invest capital, and then they go and they file a rate case to recover rates for the capital that was spent. So there's not a lot of local input or local, control, if you will, over that process. It's just a different process. This process works in reverse, where we come with a rate package and a capital plan, and we make a commitment to spend capital, and we tell you right up front what the rates are going to be to support that capital investment. And so we're able to do it ahead of time, and it gives us the flexibility to spend that capital as needed over those 4 years versus have to be in by a certain date like it is with the rate cases.
Did anybody try to negotiate the prices with you? Because in the past we have,
Yes. Yeah, they did, and I didn't have it on here, but we came in with 4.5% each year for 4 years. We had some discussion with the group. It didn't end up being a huge difference, but it was enough where they felt like they wanted to get it below 4.5% for at least the first couple years, and that was the compromise we came up with. Once we kind of told them what the difference was, we went with the 4.25. And the other thing that we explained in the meeting was kind of it's in line with our philosophy of how we do it. Rather than say go 5 years without a rate increase or 4 years without a rate increase. And that's how we've seen systems like Camel's an example, where the rates just were not keeping up with the level of investment that was needed to keep the system in compliance. And so they were faced with some really high rate increases, especially if they didn't sell the system to us, because we're able to spread the costs out a little more. So we like to have incremental rate increases around this level, spread out evenly, so we don't have years where we need 10%, 12%, 15%. We don't get behind on capital investment. And we're pretty lean with our investment even. I mean, $27 million sounds like a lot, and it's a nice amount of money to be spending in the system, but we're very careful about picking and choosing and prioritizing projects. I mean, we could go out and say we need to replace half our main and tell you that's going to cost, $100 million, and then what those rates would be not acceptable to pass on to the customers. So we try to pace out the capital improvements and prioritize them so we can keep capital investment where it needs to be, but not over what it needs to be.
So
the
this
rates stay
capital
reasonable.
improvements, the $27 million, that's over the 4 years?
Correct, over the 4 years. And in that, it's about $9 million of it is in water main replacement. So it's like a third of it is in water main replacement. And we prioritize water main replacement projects based on age of the main, frequency of breaks, and in the big project next year will be out on South Avenue. It gets Southern and South mixed up because the county's coming through and doing a big paving project, and we have a lot of breaks on South Avenue, so it makes sense to do that next year. So sometimes the year that things get done is to coordinate with some big projects as well.
I know Youngstown City, they had a big rate increase because of not doing it this way, am I correct?
They toggle between their sanitary and what they do with their sanitary and their water.
Okay.
What they do a lot, in Youngstown, is they subsidize their water system with their sanitary system. So they'll charge high sanitary rates and keep water rates artificially low, and then it gets out of whack.
Is there a problem with, more of a problem on dead-end roads as far as breaks go? Because I live on a dead-end road, and there's probably 7 breaks.
What road are you on?
On Shenley Avenue, Nebo. Because there's 7 patches there that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do have it.
Because I know they're capped off at the end.
It is not necessarily dead ends that would cause breaks. Could be the age of the main, the pressures in the area. There's a lot of high pressure in its gravity in the city in that area because this area is fed from our Woodward tanks, I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday that lives on Venlo and 170, and they're complaining they don't have enough pressure and enough volume, and it's just not what they want. It's acceptable, but you have to balance. Like if we increase their pressure and flow there on the way to Woodward Tank, we'd blow up downtown Struthers. Like you have to keep so the pressures are a little higher around here, which have something to do with it, and we do flush that area more often. Not that has anything to do with main breaks, because dead ends do need flushed. Compliance-wise, we have to flush them at least twice a year, and we'll flush some areas even more often if there's not enough demand to keep the water flowing through the system. They could get stagnant water, and so if people see hydrants on, that's because we're trying to pool fresh water through the system so that it doesn't get stagnant.
Well, also, over the next few years, if 27 million is being spent more or less on your mains and infrastructure.
Oh, correct.
So we'll have
all
less
infrastructure.
breaks and less things like that.
That's the idea.
Actually come by nature.
Correct,
Those
correct.
things will be drastically reduced.
Yes, and I shared a graphic with the negotiation team. I didn't bring it with me, and I could share it with anybody. Our engineering department loves to put this kind of stuff together, but it shows a correlation between money spent on main replacement and number of breaks. And so we've been lower on our main replacement, and so our breaks have been higher. And then there's a standard that the American Water Works Association says you should be at so many breaks per mile of main, and we're up higher. But as we spend more on main replacement, that's supposed to drop. So it'll be interesting to see how the plan works out after 4 years to see where our breaks are when we start to replace main. The goal is you want to try to replace 1% of main a year. This plan averages over the 4 years 0.9%, so we're close to the 1%. The idea being that main should have a 100-year life, and so if you replace 1% of main a year, you would replace pipe before its useful life. And other priorities come up, and certainly newer. I won't say new mains can break because that's highly unlikely. But when you have a lot of cast iron, ductile iron, mostly the old cast. Different variables. I mean, we had a, what happened on Wetmore. There was a fire that day. I'll give you guys an example of what happened there. And they, about within a half hour of when they resprayed the fire on Marion, that break happened on Wetmore. And it ended up being a $35,000 road repair because of how the water went down. Well, what happens when the firemen, and no disrespect to some of the fire, some of them know how to do it well, and some of them, it's tricky. If you don't turn the fire hydrants off in a certain way, it can create a hammer in the system. And then it could happen. It's not like it's somebody's fault. But I'm just giving an example of something that could happen that, it'll find a weak spot in the main, and the hammer will just travel through, and it'll find a weak spot in the main and break it. And that was just a cluster of things.
It wasn't even a big break?
It wasn't even a big break. The break was like this big, but it was on a hill, and it ran and it got under the road. So instead of the water surfacing, it went down under the road all the way down to Yellow Creek, down Wetmore, and the road. You have pictures of the road. Tim will tell you. It was busted up everywhere. It lifted the pavement. So you have those, and then sometimes you have ones that you could put a little patch in the road and it's fine. So we plan to. We set out to plan, and we budget money for what we call capitalized main breaks, which means main breaks that happen that we're not necessarily replacing all of it, but we're going to replace a section of the pipe, and that's included in the budget as well.
I don't know if you want to touch upon how you actually cut back our percentages from the years before,
Yeah,
just
sure.
so you can explain to them that we're actually kind of
We're starting in a better place.
starting way
Well,
better
a
than
few
we
years
would
ago,
have.
our rates got dropped when they didn't have to.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct.
So just so you got
Yes,
You
so
remember
what
that.
happened was, if we would compare what was negotiated and approved in your ordinances for this year, for the last 5 years, the rates right now are 6% lower than they would have been had we followed the original 5-year plan that we had.
So even so,
place.
this 4.5% increase is still 2% below where we should be today,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. So whatever you're starting, we're putting the 4.25 on a lower rate than 6% of a lower rate than it would have been if we would have just followed the original plan from 2017 to 21. Because that was in 2018, the corporate tax structure changed. And so, all of our rate design is all based on investment, expenses, And so our job is to manage expenses and budget capital improvements. Well, when a big expense, which is taxes, is one of our biggest expenses. We paid, I think in that plan that I say was it's in that summary, I don't wanna quote it wrong, but we paid, I thought I had it in here. Oh yeah, property taxes. We paid $9.5 million in property taxes over the last 5 years. So when the taxes changed, we came back and rolled back the rates and reduced the rate increases from the original plan. So we're starting at a lower spot than we would have had we not rolled those rates back.
I have a question, it's
Yeah.
probably a stupid question, but the 5/8 inch, is that just like the residential house, if that's the
That's the
size?
average residential.
Okay.
Yep. So we in the examples that I give,
Uh-huh.
I follow that because that's
Okay.
the most common.
Alright, yeah, I wasn't sure if that was standard.
Correct. If you
Okay.
get higher than some larger homes might have a 1-inch meter, a 1-inch connection, but when you start getting over 1 inch, those are commercial.
Okay, gotcha.
Seems like some of the older ones have 1 inch, and I know the only reason
Do
I
you
say
see
that
that?
is because I've bought houses that were flips, and we turned the water on, and
They were
it's
1
either
inches.
collapsed or broken in the front
Uh-huh.
yard that I had to fix, and
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of the older ones.
Okay, so
1
maybe
inch.
that's the case, yeah. But we have, majority are 5/8 inch
Okay.
meters. So we use that as an example for water rate examples.
Okay, thank you.
And one other note I had in the email to, when I sent it to Kathy and the clerk and Lori, was if you look back at an older ordinance and you compare, I just want to point out, you might see like apples to oranges. All the ordinances used to be in cubic feet, and cubic feet are like the hardest thing to deal with. And it doesn't make any sense to the average person what a
It's
cubic
lot
foot
easier to
is.
deal in gallons.
It's a lot easier to deal in gallons, and our bills are presented in gallons. And so I converted the ordinances to show them in gallons or per, how many did I do? Per 100 gallons, which is a common way to show water rates. So I just don't want somebody to like look at an old ordinance and look at the new ordinance, do the percentages and say these percentages don't match up. It's because I changed the unit of measure. Pretty much everything else stayed the same. I also condensed it. We used to have a section in the ordinance for every year. Everything was repeated for 4 years. I condensed that down and put the 4 years in tables. So the ordinances went from 10 pages long to 3 pages. So that's another change. That was just edit changes to the format, but everything else is the same.
Okay.
Any other questions, let me know, or reach out. You guys all know how to get a hold of me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions for public facilities? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Okay, roll right into
Thank you very
finance and
much.
legislation. Thanks, Jen.
So, yeah, thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Finance and legislation, Mr. Carselli.
Here.
Mr. Burnside here. 2 pieces on the docket this evening. Do we want to discuss the Aqua ordinance, or,
I don't think there's much to discuss.
I mean, they've always,
It's been negotiated.
and to tell you the truth, it's, like we said earlier, it should have been 6 and some
It could be
percent.
2%.
Correct, we could have been paying that the whole time. I mean, they seem like they're always fair with us, so, okay. Let's, yeah, you want to get that one out of the way. Ordinance establishing the rates at which Aqua Ohio Inc. shall furnish water to the city of Struthers and its inhabitants thereof for and during the term commencing January 1st, 2022 and extending through December 31st, 2025. Need a motion to bring it up.
Motion to bring it up.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Now that one's done. Mayor, I'm gonna ask you to, I will read through the next one and then let you explain before we proceed. Okay, second one is an ordinance creating 135.05 of the ordinances for the city of Struthers, Ohio, and establishing age qualifications for the appointment to the Struthers Police Department and declaring an emergency. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, so this came about, we have been talking about this since the beginning of last year, just to expand our outlook on what we can have, the age limits for what we can sit for the test. So we brought this to our Civil Service Commission. They looked at some of the language, found out that it was replicating an ORC. We talked to our law director. He has this ordinance in front of you. We would like to increase the age from 35 to 45 to give us basically a pot to pull from. We're going to be having a civil service exam soon, just to be able to fill the rest of our roster for our police department. We've had, just as an example, we've had someone who has approached us and wanted to see if they could sit for the test. They were retired military, 38 years old. We said you can't sit for the test. So there are different people. We just want to have a bigger pool to pick from, and just increase our sitting basically. So this is something I want to bring to you. I want to discuss this. Obviously, this is the first time you're seeing it. We did want to put it under emergency because we want to have this test soon, because there are different programs and different projects that we're trying to add to our police department. So we need the people. We need the
Well, they still
department.
have to pass the physical part anyway.
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
So they have to be qualified that
Yes.
way as well.
Let's be realistic at this point too, and we've had a lot of vacancies in our police department that we've had trouble filling over the years. And we're always in short demand as far as where our guys are getting overworked because we never have enough people. This is going to open us up for that. Second of all, we're getting guys with more experience at this point. We're getting guys that might have been on the force 10, 15 years, things like that, from other departments. And I don't see this as a negative at all. However, as Chairman of Finance and Legislation, there's one thing that you would say with this that would be a possible drawback. That would be our health insurance would definitely be higher at this rate. Now, we're only talking about a few people potentially. I don't see, in my opinion, the good outweighs the bad. I just felt the need to at least bring it up. That is something that we will have to bear.
Absolutely.
However, in our current position, I feel like this is a must. As far as hiring people that up to, if it's 45 years old, I don't really see an issue with it. I think it's a positive.
Do they judge basic health care off of age though? I don't think they can do that, can they?
I don't know.
Generally, ours are, when I sat through the healthcare for the city prior, the age of the people generally have, the older you are, generally the
Well,
more.
I know that's with insurances, but I never knew it was like for health care though, but I could be wrong. If there was
I believe there is.
well, maybe, I don't
Yeah.
know, I can't say.
John, you got any input back there?
I do not know
It's
whether
not your area.
No.
Would that fall under the form fire and everything that's filled out would be more specific to the individual?
One more time?
Would it be specific to the form fire that we fill out each year?
What?
Because that would be based on the individual, not, I don't know that,
Sure, but generally think of it two ways. You're older, more than likely you have a family. That means we're gonna pay more.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You're older, more than likely you're on more medication than if we were taking somebody, or at more risk than if we were taking a 20-year-old versus a 45-year-old.
Makes sense.
You know what I mean? And again, I'm not saying that's a deal breaker.
Right.
I'm just saying that it's not, there is a con, not
Yeah.
all pros. However, I'm still advocating and saying that we should raise the age and give us a broader spectrum of candidates to pull from. I still believe that outweighs it. I just, again, was putting all the cards on the table and not just the pros.
I agree with you. We need more bodies out there.
Absolutely.
More, if we have to raise it to 45 or whatever, that's fine, because
I have a question too.
we're having a hard
So,
time getting
is this for part-time, this is for, it would be for
Full-time
full-time
appointment
only,
only,
full-time?
yes.
So part-time, you don't have to test, or you do have to test, or
no, we can,
you're only gonna hire full-time?
right, the civil service is only for full-time employment.
Okay.
Do we
So-
give the part-timers opportunity to move into full-time if
They would have to
want?
pass, no,
They'd
they
have
would
to
have
pa-
to
they'd
pass
have
the
to
civil
do-
service exam.
Okay.
Yep, so they would have to wait until the test opens up, pass the exam, pass the physical, go through an interview process, background check, the whole.
Does anybody see any negatives from this?
I don't see no negative. I think we should move forward
I-
because, just like I say, we're short out there on the street now.
Absolutely. And plus, it's a tough thing to discriminate against somebody's age for a job like this,
Right.
especially, 35. I like to think you're still a young guy at 35, right? Even 36. So,
49.
45.
49.
everybody, but it's on the table. If nobody has anything else, I need a motion to bring it up. Second,
Second.
Thank you.
what
When's
else
the
does
next
anybody have for
As soon as
finance?
we can pass this,
Oh, okay.
so after next week, we'll get that to JP so he can schedule a test for civil service and then we'll post that. And I do believe it has to be posted for 4 weeks.
Okay.
And once it's posted, it's a process. That's why we want to do it under emergency and get it done quickly because it still will be drawn out because we have to go through the whole hiring process.
Okay. I have a resolution I'd like to bring out in front of council, asking the mayor to send letters to the Congress, the senators, and anybody involved with the infrastructure that was passed, you know, through the president and all of them, whatever. But I'd like you to send letters to them asking them for money for the infrastructure between 10 to 15 million dollars, just asking them to see if we can help with our flooding problems.
Okay, let me know when you're done.
Okay, yeah, that's about it. That's what I want to do, asking them. So, and I want to see what council thinks about that, you know, bring it out.
Okay, I think that's something we're already on top of. We just had a visit from Sherrod Brown last week to talk about the infrastructure bill, to be able to get more money for our bridges. They're sending, I'm not sure what the total amount on the bill is, but they're already on top of it. I talked to Sherrod Brown, I talked to Tim Ryan, I talked to all of our legislators on a regular basis. So I'm not sure what writing a letter would do when I can pick up the phone and call. We've been in touch with all of them. I have a great relationship. I go to all the meetings, all the county events. They are aware of the problem. We discuss with the county almost daily with the
Just let
engineer's
them down on
office.
State Street with the flooding down there.
And with House Bill 168, we applied for monies for one of the areas that we met with Guy about, and the study alone was a $1.1 million study. So
Yeah.
we're on top of everything there.
I know he has, Guy said he has a 62-page report from the flooding issues up on Judith Lane.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that we just went through a study with DLZ. They
Okay.
just completed that study, so we'll be going on to the next phase of the implementation of it.
okay. That's fine.
Is that DLZ's the ones that Frank and I met with?
Yes.
Okay, very
Yes,
good.
yeah, we're looking at a couple different options to try to get some of the things done a little quicker than normal.
Very good.
Okay, anybody else?
And this,
Go ahead.
this ordinance is 521.15, cutting high grass. Okay? It's right here, in here. The street department cuts a lot of grass.
Okay.
A lot of grass. And I feel that the prices, that $100 figure on the first 1,200 square feet or less, I feel that that figure should be raised. Both there and also on the one that exceeds 1,200 square feet.
What's it go to?
It goes to 150. I think it should be double. 200 and 300.
John, isn't there a cap on that? Didn't we run into a cap at some point? It was.
Yeah, it stands at 150 a yard.
I don't think there is. I don't know. I don't think there is. I don't remember if it was for this.
I don't remember if it was for this too.
No.
Yeah,
Can I chime
our
in this
street
too?
department
Back it
spends
used
a
to be
lot of
50
time
bucks,
cutting
no?
grass.
I mean, to be honest, but now it's $50. If you called me to cut your grass, it's $50.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're really not.
Can I chime in on this?
Go ahead, Kevin.
I agree with you 100%. We talked to Jilly about this and we met with Deb Flora from the land bank.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different projects. We have so many vacant land. We're trying to either accumulate them and sell them to the landowner to the sides, or even bring in, I know I've talked to Ryan, I don't wanna put you on the spot here, but even bringing in other companies to try to build houses on those lands.
Right.
But we need to be able to show that there's less equity than what it's worth. So we do, that would actually help us in our
Right.
office if we did up that. I don't know what the total is, because a lot of that money is sometimes not able to be collected. So that would be something that
But
would
then
help.
if not collected, it just goes on to the taxes.
Right, it goes to,
And then
it becomes a lien on the
Becomes a
property.
lien on the
Right.
property.
But the more liens we can show, the better we can show that there's not that much of a difference, yes.
You're lucky to collect 20%.
So that would be, we would like that.
Yeah,
Well, if you give me an opportunity to look into it and I could get something, if we're permitted to, I can get something prepared for next Wednesday.
Well, I mean, I'm up for being as harsh as possible, to be honest.
keep
But I'm just saying,
$500
I still wanna fall within the realm of somewhat reality here. You know what I
Right.
mean? We're not gonna charge people $1,000 to cut their grass.
No.
Or even if there's a
But-
possibility of saying, because we have sometimes, when it happens, it's once in a while. It's not all the time, but if it's something
You're a
that's,
repeat
if
offender.
it's a repeat offender after
Sure.
so many
Yeah, that
times,
sounds
it
good.
increases, is something we can look into too. Because we don't wanna, hurt
Restrict your
residents that
Yeah.
that it's not really an issue all the time.
Right.
It may happen once or twice, but it's more or less for those people that we can't
Who-
find, we can't
Right.
get to, they're just,
So,
Right.
so
Yeah.
an increase, is this to try to deter people? Or I shouldn't say deter, but to encourage people to cut their own grass?
Yes.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
the idea behind this, or is it just to make
Yes.
more money?
no,
no, not for the money aspect
Okay.
of it. It's more to be able to place more of a lien on the property so that, this is more for the vacant, and the, what I'm understanding is what you're saying is, it's more for the vacant properties that we can't
Right.
find the owners, that we're just cutting the grass every week, every
Right.
year,
The
it's
street department has
just something.
always
And
Well,
basically
yeah.
that money's going onto the taxes, but it doesn't
But we
matter
never
if
collect
it's not
it, so it's a
foreclosed
waste
on.
of
If
time.
it doesn't switch hands, then.
But we
But
can.
so in that respect, it's not really encouraging anybody to cut any grass, it's just a
Yeah,
matter
when they
of.
get behind on their
Funds.
taxes, then you can get into the land bank and they can take ownership and then we can get ownership from the land.
I was just
And
gonna ask,
yes.
what's the timeframe on that?
Sometimes quick, sometimes slow.
But also, hopefully, it
You have
does
to have
encourage
arrears
regular
of the
people to
taxes.
cut their
yeah,
grass.
to cut their grass too, right.
That's understood.
Because, and like you said, you brought in the size of the yard.
Right.
Sometimes it might be cheaper to have the city cut your yard for $100, and then
Yeah, if
just
it
let it
falls over
happen. If it's a
1,200
large
square
enough
feet.
Yeah,
area.
There's people that'll sit in their windows and look, watch out and watch you cut the
And they'll
grass.
say, oh, you missed the
But we
spot.
have to think too, that the function of the street department is not to go out there and cut people's grass all day.
No,
We
that's
have more
just-
important
it
things
Never
for
cuts
them
his
to
grass
do.
until I decide-
So
until he
we hope
decides.
you cut your grass. We don't
Yes,
want
it
them to
don't
have to
pay
go
that
cut it. They have
way.
other stuff to do.
right.
He's a little bit
You
better
know.
now.
So if it goes up, then he's gonna cut it more often.
Will they come out next year, week,
You interested?
You guys back?
This is kind of off the subject, but has any of you received any calls about the fees that the landlords are paying on their?
I have not. When I did from a landlord when this first went into
I did when it
effect,
first started,
but I have not received any since.
I got one and he's complaining, he says I pay taxes on these properties and stuff, why should I have to pay the fees?
We also have to explain that those taxes go to the county, not
Right.
to the city. We get about 15% of that after the breakdown.
But he's upset,
I got the same one you got then
About
from the
15%?
apartments.
yeah.
Yeah, same call. I got the same call.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and he does take care of all this
Right.
property, he's a good citizen, but you know what? It's, they're paying for the bad.
Correct.
Exactly.
And
They're paying for the bad apples.
what we
It's
created,
something that we
what
had
we
to
created
fix.
last year, or a year and a
It's
half
fair.
ago,
I-
is fair, and we didn't go crazy with it, and at the end of the day, it does pay for our property code enforcement agent for the most part, and that has helped the city tremendously.
Should we, like the mayor made a good point, should we establish for the good landlords that do their due diligence and all that, a discount? If
I-
they're other citizens?
I wouldn't be against that, but I think that it hasn't been in effect long
Long
enough.
enough to do that.
I mean, how are you gonna do it after, it's only been in effect a year?
Right.
And there would
you
have to
know.
be certain stipulations, that you have to be a
Yeah.
resident,
We-
you have
it
to
would
have
really
good
have to
property
be
code
taught.
violations.
And I also
It
think that
would
that's
have to be
going
a-
to complicate
Yeah, I think so.
things a little bit more, you know what I
We
mean?
have to put something in
And
an ordinance
being realistic, you know, you rent here, you make money here, paying $50 isn't the end of the world. In my opinion, and I'm saying that as somebody who has rentals in the city that are registered with.
Yeah.
And they're paying the $50 isn't an issue to me. I make money on those rentals here in the city. If that $50 makes it an easier process and a better process for the city to keep track of who is coming and who's going, then I'm happy to pay the $50.
That same person that called me and you
And
told me they were gonna call you. Did they call you?
yes, and I said
Okay.
to call you.
I just wanna say one more thing, actually, I got a phone call about a lady complaining that there's a lot of dogs loose recently in this area, and some of them seem aggressive. So I don't know what exactly we have on the books about registering animals or anything like that, or if there isn't anything, maybe we can start looking into something.
I know, we have
We
an
have.
abundance of pit bulls in the city.
Yeah.
And I don't think these people realize that they're supposed to register those dogs and they're supposed to have insurance on those dogs.
Yeah.
Well, also though, if there's an abundance
And there's
of
ordinances.
loose dogs,
We have ordinances.
then you know what, you should be calling the dog warden.
Yeah.
You should be calling the
So
dog
I
warden.
mean, I don't know if there's really much that we can do.
You can call our police
Ordinance
department.
wise?
We have ordinances in place.
Yeah,
We really
the
do.
ordinances were
We
there.
have
Yeah.
quite a bit on it, because we've went through this in the past.
Do we
A
have
few
one for
times.
registering like the pit bulls?
Actually, the pit bulls are supposed to be in the fenced-in
Is
area
Ohio?
with a roof on top of it.
That's
Yeah.
Ohio, yeah.
Okay,
Right?
Yeah.
okay, so it falls through here too, okay,
And it's not just, it's vicious dogs, but they mean pit bulls specifically.
yeah.
I mean, the German Shepherd would be vicious as well, but they have to be in a cage.
Megan, the only thing I could possibly think of that might help there is our dogs at large, if I'm not mistaken, is a minor misdemeanor offense. And it doesn't elevate even if you've had prior convictions for that.
Okay,
So I don't know if maybe council would want to take a look at possibly increasing the penalties if the dogs are in, roaming without any supervision.
So you're saying on repeat offenders,
Yeah.
more or less?
You could either do it on if they have, based upon prior convictions, or you can make it an M1, or an M2, or an M3, M4, regardless. And then they're looking at jail time right off the bat. What I would probably do, it's something like that, is I could amend it, if I had to, I could amend it to say minor misdemeanor disorderly conduct, to make it justified. But maybe increasing the penalty might help a little bit as well.
okay.
Sounds good. Anybody else, anything for finance and legislation? What do you got, Lori?
One thing, so while we're all sitting here in September, let's start thinking about front yard gardens. Let's start thinking about what we wanna do, how we wanna address it, what we wanna say, because my garden in my backyard is completely pulled out.
Okay.
I think they should.
Okay, so if you're gonna have it in the front yard, I think it needs to be maintained, it needs to be, so.
We are
this
here
is
for
the time-
this is finance and legislation, so
Well, the
anybody could,
legislation.
they could speak their piece. I'm saying, we could have this conversation right now,
Okay.
if you would
Well,
like.
no, but I'm just saying that, like, we always bring it up in April and, you know,
Yes.
whatever, so we have a few months to play with now to say, like, what we want, or look what we already have on the books and enforce what we already have.
Sure.
Or, you know, make it to where,
I'm always for simplifying ordinances. I feel like they're enforced a lot easier and better. So in my opinion, if we were going to go with one thing or another with front yard gardens, I would be in favor of taking them out and no front yard gardens versus having some type of stipulations. Like, you gotta be so far from the street, or you gotta be this or that, you can only be so tall. I would rather not do that, because then, again, you have officers out there, they're gonna go measure, see how tall it is, they're gonna go measure. I don't wanna waste their time. You're either gonna have it or you're not, and that's kind of, in my opinion, how a lot of these ordinances should go. They're gonna be much easier enforced.
Well, that one on Elm Court, first of all, you have 11 feet the city owns. That's on,
We have an easement, correct?
right, we have an easement. So they got that on
I went up and measured, it was 11 feet
11 feet
Off
from the curb.
from the curb.
That's pretty good coincidence.
And when you're bringing this up, I want you to keep in mind, we do have an ordinance already in place for this.
Well, we haven't, not directly not directly for this. It's unsightly, that is the ordinance, correct?
No, because the trimming the hedges and anything that's gonna deface property value.
Sure. But that's giving a lot of gray area to what is going to decrease property value and what is acceptable, and now we're going into one person or two persons' opinions, which truly laws are meant to be black and white, and they're easily enforced in black and white, versus some, I might drive by and I think it's unsightly. Our property code enforcement agent might go out there and think that it's perfectly fine. So I feel like we're either going to go all or nothing is my opinion on it. And it was my opinion the first time,
I agree with that. We either go all or nothing.
It just seems like it's going to be a lot easier enforced that way.
Yeah.
It sure would be easier to enforce, but there again, it's there's compromise to be made there. I mean, as far as even in the winter months, that everything's cleaned out of the front yard, so all you have there is just bare ground as opposed to tarps and blocks and stakes and things like that. Containing as far as sizes is concerned, same thing. I just hate to take a freedom away from people to have a garden in the front yard. I've got a bunch of gardens in my backyard that are actually the front yard if you're on the other street. That everybody seems to be fine with, putting gardens over there, in my neighborhood, which I don't have a problem with. But I don't have problems with the
That's
gardens in the
community
front yard.
Community gardens.
Front yard. It's front yard.
Really, it's not though, because there's no house there.
Well, there's a garage. If we want to get technical about it, we're going to measure how far from the street or whatever the case might be. But it's like, if it's good for that part of Struthers, then why isn't it good for other parts of Struthers as well?
And also to reiterate again that we only have a few in the city. It's not something that is happening all over the city to where it's a huge inconvenience or a huge unsightly thing. There's only a few in the city. And then where would that end? Can people not have tomato plants on their front yard? Can they not have, then
Well, I
what do
do
you
think
say is
that we
edible
have
and not
to do
edible?
something about not being, like, at this point, like I said, there's no
I-
reason to have it in your
I think what
yard
we
still.
should
I don't
do-
have a problem with,
Is
Like,
bring
when
in the
it's not
person
season.
who has to enforce it
right,
and see what he thinks.
who has to enforce
I think we should bring in the
Should
person
bring him in
who
and
has
see
to
what he
enforce
thinks
it.
about it.
it?
And if we're gonna put in stipulations, then this is gonna be the guy enforcing those stipulations. You know what I mean?
Well, as far as that goes, I mean, it's as you said from the very beginning. This is basically a matter of opinion.
Sure.
So I mean, we are the governing board here, so I think it should be our decision to make.
Well, it's,
Whether it's hard for somebody to enforce or not.
at the end, it is our decision. But I
Exactly.
would still be asking for his input on the matter.
And it would be, Tim Roddy would be the one enforcing it, if he's police chief, because it's, Joey would be code enforcement director, but enforcing it is the police department. So we can ask the police department, absolutely.
Sure. But yeah, again, at the end of the day, you're 100% right. It is ours
Or
to
just-
make the
Yeah.
decision on.
Right.
You know what I mean?
If they only take care of them, they wouldn't have this problem.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and that's what I mean, if there are things in place, one comes to mind, one garden that I drive by particularly in the off-season months is, there's stakes standing up, there's cement blocks, there's tarps, I mean, have all that stuff removed, put it in your backyard, there's no reason, there's no reason to make it
But is that something that you could do, is look at an ordinance from this time to this time, there will be no, or it has to be covered by
Or there's
code
maybe an
anything?
ordinance that already covers it,
Yeah.
and like you said, I mean, there's no reason for
Well, that would
that.
be unsightly, no?
Sure. Right, sure.
So, but I just know we talk about it all the time in like April, and it's just not the right time. So if we do wanna make changes, or if we wanna see what Joey wants to do, I think now's the time to just start brainstorming on it a little bit and go from there. Cause it's not
I mean,
fair to
at
people
the
to
end of
have
the day,
gardens.
Kat is 100% right that there's only a few.
Right,
But on a few of those, we know for sure that there is a backyard that they can put it in.
And I think they do
They-
clean up everything with that community garden for the most part, right? Like what, they pull out, people pull out all their stuff at the end of the season.
Yeah, and they have a landscaping crew come in and they've, the ones that are all overgrown, they've already cut those down, so.
And
Okay.
in my personal opinion, again, I don't think they should be in a front yard. However, we have community garden in the city. We only have a few people who can't do this in their backyard that do it in their front yard. We have land bank land, so make another community garden.
You know, there again, it's one of those things, you know, you make it, you use one of the land banks for community gardens, the garden doesn't get taken care of, and it's unsightly over there, so I mean, it's just a matter of, you know, moving it from one place to another
We have a
place.
designated area, but you also said it doesn't bother you that it's there.
No, and in the front yard gardens, I don't see it as being necessarily a problem. I mean, there are some that just aren't well taken care of.
Sure.
You know, and particularly in the off season, there's no reason to leave that kind of stuff, you know, sitting in your front yard. So,
I agree completely.
yeah,
But I think that this could be easily mitigated by not doing it in general. You know what I mean?
or it could be mitigated with having some restrictions involved with having a garden in your front yard.
But I would still say in the time that that garden is in full bloom, it's still unsightly. You know what I mean? So that's,
you know,
Taking care of it.
I don't know. I mean, you know, now we're talking about, you know, what is aesthetically pleasing to anybody's yard. You know, I mean, it's like there's plenty of people in the city that have landscaping that's atrocious. You know, so I mean, you know, so what are we going to do? We're going to have some ordinances, you know, against them. You're not allowed to have certain types of landscaping in your front yard.
sure.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think it's-
Yeah, I mean, listen, I understand 100% where you're coming from.
I mean, and we are really talking about what, 3 gardens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about 3
Three
gardens.
or
We,
four.
we have more houses in the city that whose landscaping and the appearance of their yards is much worse than that, and we're gonna worry about 3 gardens. I mean, you know, that's just
To
kinda
me,
how I
it's
look
just,
at it.
just because there's far worse, doesn't mean that we shouldn't put any focus on this other issue. You know what I mean?
Well, then how come there's
One
no
doesn't-
focus on the other then? I mean, how come there's no focus on people that just have ugly yards? You know?
Yeah, I guess we're just not gonna see eye to eye on this.
No
I
problem.
think we gotta put some stipulations out there, you
Yeah, I
know?
think in the wintertime, when the garden season's over, they gotta get their stuff out.
Yeah, get it out of there.
That's all.
You know, I mean, and height restrictions, you know, I don't know, there are probably a number of things that we could put into place. There again, enforcing it would make it more difficult, but, you know, with 3 gardens, I mean, you know, it's like, how big of a deal could it be?
And is it really the plants that they're growing that is in the height violation, or is it the weeds around the plant?
We could put that on our code enforcement director. He can go out there and he could analyze it himself.
I mean, some people grow sunflowers and they get pretty big, but,
Mhm.
Corn's gonna get high.
you know.
Yeah, I'm just more kinda like, listen, you got a backyard, put your garden in the backyard, like 99% of everybody else who has a garden.
Yeah.
99.8% of
Like the
everybody
resident
else.
on Elm Street, he has it in his side front yard because he has, his whole backyard is shaded with trees and he has 8 kids.
Sure.
So he uses that garden to feed his kids because
We-
he can't grow in the back.
We also got a community garden
Yeah.
to address those people, you know what I mean? Who have an issue like that, which
Yeah,
is
but if you're
very
busy
few and
with
far between.
parenting
That's
8
his
kids,
livelihood,
drive
this
down,
guy's
drive
garden.
back.
He spends
It's-
all day in his garden working and,
You want Elmport with a big side yard?
uh,
No,
Oh,
Elm
okay.
Street.
Elm Street. She's talking Elm Street.
that's all organic too. That's how much he's into it.
And if he said he would come to a council meeting and speak on behalf of people in gardens.
Speak on behalf of him and the other 2 people that got front yard gardens, that's who he's speaking on behalf of? Fair enough.
Yeah, I would too though, if I'm being singled out as one of 3, I would want to speak on my own behalf too.
That's also 33%,
You're right,
which is a lot.
Yeah.
You don't get something to think about that.
Yep. All right. Finance and legislation calling for adjournment. Need a motion.
Motion.
Second. Meeting adjourned.
Okay.